morning, everybody. Thanks for coming. My name is Douglas Galloway. I am an artist here in San Antonio, Texas. And for those that are zooming in from other places, we're in Texas. And I have been here in this space for about 3 years, and I was in the interior of the building for a little longer than that. So welcome. Thank you, Creative Mornings, for having me and allowing me to share my story of how I became an artist, my space, and also to talk about pride. So, a feeling of deep pleasure or satisfaction derived from one's own achievements, the achievements of those with whom one is closely associated, or formal qualities and possessions that are widely admired. The consciousness of one's own dignity. And of course, we're talking about pride, which is our lovely definition from the dictionary. I think that we all can talk about what pride means to us, because it's an individual feeling, right? I think we're prideful of this and proud about that and other things in our life. So I'm gonna talk from my experience of pride and what it means for me and how I came to feel pride. I think pride for me means to honor. It means honoring. And especially for me, it means to honor the people and the places and the events that have been on my journey and that have brought me and uplifted me. And sometimes not so uplifting, but all those things that have brought me to this moment right now, speaking to you guys. If you think about it, you're all sitting here as a result of something that you did in your past. It's an odd little feeling. So I will begin as my journey as an artist. And I can't remember a time that I didn't want to be an artist. When I was, I don't know, how old are you in kindergarten? Like 6 years old? You're about 5, 6. Yeah, how old, Megan? You have kids. About 5 or 6, I was in kindergarten, and our first day of class, our teacher handed us a bunch of paper and crayons and stuff, and she told the class to, okay, everybody draw what you want to be as an adult, when you grow up. And there was lots of firemen, nurses, and policemen, and I drew a little artist. And my little drawing was a little stick figure with, of course, what a kid thinks of an artist at that time. I had the artist smock, I had the mustache and the goatee, and I had the beret, all in black. And I was holding a little artist palette. And so at age 5, I knew that's what I wanted to grow up and be. And I guess subconsciously and consciously, I made that effort to strive for always working in a creative field or doing something creative. And my parents realized that I wasn't going to play football, and I wasn't interested in sports, and I wasn't interested in doing this or that, but I was interested in drawing, because that's all I did as a kid. And so my dad and my mom put me in classes, private classes with a watercolorist named Ann Pearson. And so really my journey of pride began with this little guy right here, which is a replica of what was sitting at the table in my private lessons. I'll bring it so y'all can all see it. And it was a little coffee can. And Annie had a coffee can, and it was covered, hers was covered with magazine photos of eyes that she had cut out, and a really big one. I don't know where she got this big eye, and she stuck it right in the middle. And this was the I can. And it's always been there in the back of my mind. It's always been there. And anytime we felt like I couldn't do something and I would express that, she would tell me, well, you owe me a nickel. And so I'd have to put it in the I can. Now, if I didn't have a nickel or I didn't have something, I had to write on a piece of paper that I can do this, or I have done that. And so my journey of pride began with the I can. And I learned to find the pride in that, in my achievements, the simplest of achievements. And so I went on further in my life and kept in the art field and went on to grow up, kind of, and and started practicing art professionally, working odd jobs that were creative geared, and eventually my journey led me to San Antonio, way back in the 80s, and then I moved to New Orleans after that, and then back here to San Antonio. And I was a self-supporting artist in New Orleans, and I moved from New Orleans back to Texas before Katrina hit. Unfortunately, I still had all my connections in New Orleans, and all my galleries that I were being repped in were all still in New Orleans. And when Katrina hit, all of that got lost. Galleries are gone, people were gone. I had family in New Orleans that were displaced. Art was gone. And that led me on a journey of really soul searching, because I unknowingly, I guess I felt somewhat depressed. And I stopped doing art, and I put art down. And I put art down for about 10 years. And it wasn't until my father said to me, I wish you'd go back to doing your art. And then wasn't long after that my father passed away. And I thought to myself, why not? So here I am. And I picked up my brushes and I started painting again. And different from before, when I was a painter and an artist then, I started painting things that meant something to me, something very, very personal. You know, I think as artists, we have to unzip this skin covering that covers our heart, and we have to open it up. And I think the best art and the best artists are the ones that just go ahead and open up and expose and show you what's there without hiding, without keeping it back, without holding anything in. And so you, the viewer, gets to see that, and you get to view that, and we as an artist get to tell our story. And sometimes those stories are very, very hard, and exposing really, really touchy things can be very scary as an artist, because we're putting it out there for you to judge. We're putting it out there for you to look at and you to see. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it's not as successful. But I look at all those things as a success, because what can you do but look at things and learn from them, right? So so I began telling stories, and I began painting in a series of work. And I told stories of my grandmother. My grandmother was this wonderful woman who was a cook and a housewife and an accountant, and she was born in Sweetwater, Texas, in West Texas, on a cotton farm. And at the age of 3, she lost her mother. Her older sister picked her up and set her on a stool and gave her a spoon and told her to stir. And she stirred a pot at age 3. And that's how she learned to cook. And she grew up being a great cook. But she was also hysterical in her dry sense of humor and her little pranks that she would play. And so my first series of art I did was called Cotton and Sky. And it was about her and her best friend sneaking off into the cotton fields of her father's and rolling cigarettes when they were just probably 11 or maybe 9, and rolling cigarettes from the tobacco and the paper that they stole from her father, and laying back on that West Texas dry dirt and looking through the sky and smoking those cigarettes that she said were about this big around, because they didn't know how to do it, and almost caught the cotton field on fire too. It was her way of saying, hey, look, I'm a rebel, even back then. And she was a hoot. And then I went on to tell further stories. The next series I did was for my father, who passed away. And he was born and raised in Sweetwater, and always wanted to go back, always just desired to go back, talked about Sweetwater his whole life. And so I did a series for him, and honoring him and honoring the memory of Dad. And then after that, I continued on. I did a series called Submerged. And Submerged was me dealing with Hurricane Katrina, me dealing with the aftermath and the time of the water rising and the devastation that was. If you remember back then, it was pretty scary. It was the first for me. It was the first natural disaster that I can really think of that really was emotional. Of course, I had emotional ties to it too. And so Submerged was about, and this piece actually behind you was from Submerged. And Submerged was about the highest, where the water had gotten to the highest level. It wasn't going to rise any further. It had gotten to the highest point, that murky, dark water. And that moment in there, how you have to make a decision. You have to make a decision to fight it or to let go. And sometimes that very act of just letting go, you're able to survive. You're able to get through it. It's that idea of the darkest night of the soul, where we think everything is lost, and we have to sink into that loss to get through it, because sometimes that's the only way we can, and life has a way of pushing us to that until we do it, and so dealing with Katrina was difficult, but it was play of light. It was a play of how light digitizes into dark water and disperses if we're able to see it. And then eventually the series that you're surrounded with right now is a series called Carlos. And Carlos was about my best friend. And he passed away of AIDS. Back, it's been years now, but I think he was 37 when he died. But Carlos was strong. He battled the disease like a trooper. And it was a time when you were told that it was basically a death sentence. And so this is a whole dedication to Carlos, and his strength These desert plants thrive with barely any water, you know, and still yet they find a way to make it. They find a way to exist and multiply, and they find a way to bloom and feed native animals and birds, and then reseed and repopulate in this beautiful mandala of life. So this was dedicated to Carlos and the strong person that he is or was. And it's great because telling these stories, I feel these people here with me. You know, I feel my grandmother, and I feel Carlos, and I feel my father, and I feel like they're just here uplifting me, and it gives me pride that I can find pride in things that meant a lot, and I can find my happiness and my pride in honoring those things that in some ways were not great, but I'm able to look into them, really look into them, and find something of meaning and something that means something for me. And then I open up and I create and I give it to you for you to see it. And I don't expect for you to see Carlos, but I hope that in my work that you are reminded of someone in your life. So with a Carlos example, that's someone in your life that you lost too soon, but meant the world to you, and it's actually changed and affected who you are today. So, and you have pride in that person. So that's my story, guys.